Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello and welcome back to Homeschool Together. Thank you for joining us. If you have a chance, head down below and click on some links, especially our YouTube channel. We are beginning to wrap up very soon, I think, here. The summer of science, which has become the fall of science.
Listen, science just was delayed a little bit. We had a great time with it, though.
We have, and we're going to do a wrap-up episode, and we got a special little thing at the end of that wrap-up episode for you guys, so stay tuned to that. It might be next week or two. Keep an eye out for that. If you also have a chance, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. It helps other people see that, you know, we're not weirdos, and well, I mean, we're kind of weird, but I mean,
just a little bit.
But whatever, we do our weird right, and it's entertaining.
I remember hearing sometime, I don't know if it was a movie or what, but it was like falling in love is making sure that your kind of crazy is like compatible with their kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle piece of crazy.
Exactly. So we fit. Hopefully we fit with you all, and you like listening to us.
You have children, you build other puzzle pieces of crazy.
Exactly.
And you have dogs that like oinkies and chews, and she's staring at us right now.
Yeah, our chocolate lab is...
She's our mascot.
She's asleep on the floor here. She's doing the hard work.
So today we're going to be talking about a little two-parter here. It's kind of a cool thing. We wanted to talk about it is maybe building out kind of a unit study or some type of ELA multi-month or maybe a month-long project. Maybe if you're thinking about the project-based learning that we had talked about a little bit earlier and a couple episodes ago, we're going to be talking about how to do a novel study, not something that's novel and new, but actually...
But maybe it is to you.
But maybe it is to you. But taking a novel and building something around that. And now a lot of us we do a Charlotte Mason inspired homeschooling a curriculum with Build Your Library. We've done Torchlight as well. We've done Blossom and Root. A lot of literature-based elements in there where we are reading books, we are reading chapter books. But we're going to be approaching this today as if you kind of don't do that, or maybe you want to try and do something a little bit different. Right. And think about bringing a novel in, maybe something that your child is interested in, or maybe that you're interested in, or maybe in a theme or a subject that you guys might be interested in, and doing this almost like you had pointed out right before we started, like a unit study or... Yeah,
it's like kind of like a unit study around a novel. So we're going to do a two-parter. We're going to talk about the ELA part of it today. And the next week, we're going to talk about how we can bring in other subjects, because we love to be well-rounded homeschoolers and pull in other things where we can.
So first of all, like, where would this fit with the people listening? Is this something you can do at summer? Is this something you can do in the holiday season?
I mean, I think studying a good book is always appropriate. You could do it anytime you want.
Deep dive is nice.
Yeah, well, and I would say too that while we're going to use the word novel here, this could be a graphic novel, right? This could be, if you've got, our oldest daughter is really into graphic novels. This can be done at whatever level, right? Mm-hmm. You could do it with a very small child. You could do it, up. This could also, usually when we think of novel studies, we think of the student reading themselves. But this could be something that you all do together. Maybe this is the novel that you as a parent are reading out loud to your students. So there's options. But usually when we read one of the literature selections in like Build Your Library, there's structure that's built around that, and we just use that, right? There's comprehension questions, there's maybe some activities, there's some other things that they've already built into the curriculum. But if you want to read a novel that's not covered in one of your curriculums, or you don't do literature curriculums in general, and you want to just try to like, hey, let's all read this book together as a family, and let's work on it. This could work for you. So there's definitely options. Even if you have a child who's 5 and can't read this for themselves, you could do a lot of these techniques with you reading to your child. Well, and it could be an audiobook. An audiobook also works.
So you to a child, you to multiple children. This could also be a family type of thing where you guys
Mm-hmm.
are all reading it at the end of the night, or this could also be kind of a book clubby type of thing as well. So
Absolutely.
a lot of different structures, a lot of different ways to implement this. So don't feel like so rigid that like, oh, I'm reading a book to my student.
No,
You can be
yeah.
very creative in the deployment of this in your homeschool.
Right. It doesn't have to be. When we think of like what we did in school with studying a novel and then doing a book report and having it, it can be as formal or as informal as you want. We just wanted to give you some ideas in case you wanted to tackle a book that's not covered in one of your curriculum, or your kids into graphic novels or whatever.
So why could this work well? I'm almost imagining great for multi-ages. That's the first thing I'm thinking.
Obviously, right? I love the idea of like a family book club. When our younger gets a bit older and she's starting to read independently, I would love family book club.
And we're a big dinner and a movie family.
We are.
We do like that dinner, movie, book, maybe dinner, movie, book.
So we did this. We had this. I don't, if you guys have listened long enough on the podcast, you'll remember this. But we did this marriage book club thing for a while where Matt and I would read the same book together.
We're going to get back to it. At the end of next year, I promise you. Look at it here. Pinky swear. Reach.
Reach. There we go. Okay.
All right. When everything is done, and we'll be done.
Right. When I've got my degree, you got your degree.
We will start our book club
Okay.
again.
So what we would do is we would agree how much we would read, and then as we were
That
reading,
was a 6-foot pinky reach here. I had to close most of that distance.
it was, well, yeah, you're tall. So we would agree what we would read, and we would read, like, for example, I think we both read The Godfather.
Or like Jaws. We read Jaws together.
Right, yeah. So we read Jaws together, and then
We should read The Exorcist right there.
Oh no, I'm not doing that. And then we read Jaws, and then we watched the movie. And that night, I made like a whole seafood dinner for us that night, and we watched Jaws. And so we loved that old
It would
like.
have been smart to do surf and turf.
Was it TBS or TNT's Dinner and a Movie with Paul and Annabelle from the like
we love that.
late 90s or whatever. Anyway, we love doing that kind of stuff. So yes, marriage or family book club, right? So definitely great for multi-ages. It's awesome because rather than our students reading or even listening in a vacuum to this story and comprehending it on their own, we can help them build comprehension through activities around the novel.
And model thinking, like critical thinking, model questions.
Yeah, how do you make an emotional connection to what you're reading? How does it go like maybe deeper, right? There's so many layers. It's funny as an adult when I see movies or things that I saw as a kid, or even read stories to our girls, I'm seeing so many more layers than what I realized was there. So as adults, we can really help them to, maybe see more of the nuance, or, oh, maybe this is actually a satire on this piece. And even in children's literature, there is so much depth in some of these books.
And help them with the context. Like, a good example of that would be like the Narnia books, right?
Oh, right. So much context.
It's set during World War I, right? And children being, pushed. I think it's World War I, right? If I remember.
I thought,
or was it World War II? Yeah, it's World War II.
II.
And they're being sent to the northern areas, so they're not going to be impacted by the Blitz. And yeah, I think it was World War II. And yeah, like that context is lost, I think, when you just let your student read it. And you can next week we can talk about that, about bringing in history and all these other things. So yeah, for now they kind of got an idea here, and we're starting to think about, how do we choose a book? What does that process look
so
like?
Definitely the very first key is it's got to be something our students will be interested in.
Yeah.
Even if there's, and we'll talk more next week about other subjects, but if there's a subject that you really want to get into, like you're studying World War II or whatever it is, there's always some way, I think, to find something that would be a little bit more interesting. Maybe your child is more into action type stories. Maybe they're more into, maybe you have, our girls would want to, I know my oldest, she'd read anything with a love story. There was a love story involved with it, she would read it, right? So it's like, can you find something that is going to spark some interest in your learner, which is, it's great, right? We're not beholden to a school that tells us what we have to read. We can read whatever we want. So first and foremost, pick something that your student and you are interested in, because you're going to spend some time with this book. So pick something that you like.
Yeah, and I think the interest helps pull you through, especially if you slow down the reading with some other exercises and some thought experiments and whatnot. You're right. You want that interest to be able to pull you through that timeline. You're not going to read it just in a week or so.
Right.
It might take multiple weeks to read it, especially if it's a larger book. You're absolutely right. You want that interest to be there. That can help, string you through the stopping points.
And make sure that the tone and the theme and the length are all something that works for your child, right? Our daughter, if we read something that was a really like heavier type novel, that'd be very impactful. She's a super emotional person, and that would just, it would wreck her. And I would want to make sure she was old enough to handle the material that she would be reading at that time, right? And the length, make sure that you're not taking on, there's some books that are amazing, but the length is so much that it's just, it's out of scope for that age of child. And it would just be too much. So really take that stuff into account. If you think that you would really love a longer book, then you'll have to consider, like I'm reading right now, I'm reading the Lunar Chronicles with my daughter, and each book is like, I don't know,
really long.
800 pages or 700 pages. They're long. They're very long books. But I'm reading it to her, and it is still taking us a really long time. It's got like 60 chapters. It's taking us a long time to read through this every night at bedtime. But you could consider that you read it, or you could consider an audiobook if it's really long. But just make sure that you take on something that's like doable for your child's emotional level, for their academic level, and for your time that you have to be able to do it. So some good examples, like early elementary, you could read like The Boxcar Children. We read that to our daughter I don't know, a couple of years back, and she really liked it. Frog and Toad books are great. And for later in elementary, there's just some classics like Charlotte's Web's a great one. I remember reading The Secret Garden when I was a kid, right? There's lots of good classic literature that you could pull in. You can also, we're big fans of the Great Illustrated Classics because it's, a bit condensed. So whatever it is that, really could spark interest for your learner. And you can look at places like Goodreads. They have lots of great lists that you can look through, and you can determine what might be right. Oh, hey, I have a 10-year-old that loves action and adventure. What kind of options? So there's some good things. The Giver for middle school, that was always a good one.
That was good. And that's a nice movie tie in there as well.
High school, there's tons of great books that you can look at. And of course, high school, there's so many great lists of great high school literature.
As they mature, you can really open up the available books there. Yeah.
And I think, we want to choose books with some amount of depth because we want to be able to get into those strong themes, and maybe there's moral questions, or there's something about history here. So, there needs to be like room for emotional and character exploration in whatever book that you choose.
Absolutely. Now, once you have chosen that book, I think the next hardest thing for you to do is figure out your pacing and your scheduling when it comes to building out your little unit study or this time period that you're doing with this novel, and finding out, what it is. So maybe like think about the framework, and that will be determined by the length of the book. It's kind of what you were saying before, but think about like, that 2 to 6 week time frame. That might be a good way, because I think you can kind of, going beyond that 6 weeks, I feel like you might kind of burn out on it.
Yeah, it really
depends.
depends.
A month and a half of a book.
It depends what it is and what your student's into, but figure out what makes logical sense, right? Whether it's chapters or maybe the book is broken into a couple of big parts.
And who knows if you guys pick up a book one in a series that carries on forward. I mean, don't pick the wheel of time, because you'll be here for 5 years reading all the books.
Unless your child is super into it, then go for it.
And you guys
right?
are big readers, maybe,
and you love fantasy, then go for it. So once you've broken the book into logical chunks, be very realistic about your sessions, right? So when I started reading this latest book to her, it was like, I want to say it's like 61 chapters. She goes, great, we'll be through it in 61 days. And I was like, no, it's going to take us like 80 to 90 days, right? Because there's going to be days that we miss. And so be realistic about what you're asking for, depending on your time or your learner's reading speed. And
some books, their chapters are not, 15 pages. They could be 30 or 40 pages long. And that's a lot of reading, just sitting and reading out loud or reading together. I mean, obviously if you have an older student, they are reading it along with you. That's cool. But like, I think you want to be maybe doing some out loud reading, or maybe doing some listening in that respect. And, crunching through 30 or 40 pages is a lot of work.
Yeah, it definitely can be. So come up with something that works. It's best, I think, to break up the book at the start. Like, look at how big it is, how it's broken up, assess how much time you have. How much do you want to put into this each day? Is this just like your child's half-hour reading a day that you want to go into the novel study? Great. And you can always do at the beginning, you can always do a pacing to say like, okay, read for 30 minutes. How many pages did you get done? Okay, great. And then we'll break it up. We're doing this with our daughter in her BFF book club with her friend that, we know in her 30 minutes of reading a day about how far she can get. And so I'm letting the other mom know, okay, because her daughter reads really quick. And then I'm like, hey, okay, here's where we think we'll be by this date. So, you can do some pacing and figure it out, but definitely make something logical and something very achievable.
Yeah, I think that's right. Keeping it short and consistent, I think, is the most important thing there, where you don't want to do burnout, because where you have to like make up a day and you're reading for 4 or 5 hours, or if you have the pacing set incorrectly and you're spending multiple hours at it every day, it could be almost something that you don't want to come back to.
Right. We don't want to burn our kids out. Definitely.
Absolutely. And then obviously leave time for rereading. So if you guys get to a passage and that's particularly important, you may ask your child to go, hey, reread that section right here. This is really important. We'll discuss this later. Or it can also leave rooms for questions and answering and discussing, like, oh, there's a cliffhanger at the end of the chapter. What do you think is going to happen? Doing some inference and prediction there. And all the various tools that we have in our belt on drawing out learning and understanding, we want to leave a little bit of time for that as well. And also giving the students time for their own creative responses, being creative and thinking through things and making mistakes and doing their own thinking. We want to make sure they have enough space to do that as well. And so factor that into your timing and your reading, because that is probably, some of these things are best done right in the moment as opposed to waiting a little bit longer, because you might want to get first time responses.
So the other piece of this is deciding, as you're figuring out your pacing and your structure, is how are you going to incorporate discussion? Are you going to have like, is this going to be what you're going to discuss at lunch? Are you going to have like once a week where you do like a book club with tea or with cocoa and cookies? Or like, is this something that you want to be interactive? I think that's one of the advantages that we have. A teacher in a classroom can't have everything be interactive one-on-one, obviously, but we can do that with our students. So as they're reading, obviously we're going to talk later about, more academic things that they can do as far as writing and projects and stuff. But just the discussion part of it, what do they think's going on? What are they excited about? What do that prediction element of what do you think's going to happen? So think too about how's as you're reading, how is that gonna be a discussion piece or an interactive piece. I guess I should say interactive piece. And it doesn't have to be, I'm just thinking of this now, it doesn't have to be a book club within your house. You could even have grandma or grandpa reading the same book and having that conversation with your student, which would be a really special way for them to connect as well.
Well, especially, like if you have weekly sessions where grandma, grandpa, or your aunt, uncle, or whomever in your life have the children for that day and they're doing some homeschool with them, that could be that time that they do that. They do the literary studies there, and that you can offload that work to them.
That could be a special thing. So, or they can definitely do what our daughter did and start a little book club with their friends.
And then it gets into structuring the reading sessions.
Yeah.
What do these periods look like? Are you doing independent reading? Are you doing read alouds? Are you doing audiobook pairings where the two of you or the kids are all listening to it? Maybe your spouse is doing this and they listen to the book on the way to work and listen to it on the way home.
Sure.
And then the kids have an hour of listening during the day, and then you guys pick it up in the evening and do your questioning and answering. You can have a lot of creativity, a lot of fun. Great thing to bring in a spouse who maybe isn't always part of the homeschooling.
Yeah, this is a great way to do that. You're right.
And then basically adding little trackers, thinking about logging your reading, having your student log their reading so they can see the progress that they're making. Sticky notes for questions and favorite quotes that maybe come from the book from that day that you can leave for your student to think about and ruminate on. And then also mini booklets. Maybe you can make a little booklets on Canva or something like that.
Yeah, or we have a mini dictionary, like a personal dictionary for our oldest daughter.
That's been super helpful.
That maybe they write down new words that they come across.
And you can have one just for that book you're reading, so they can build a little bit of a vocabulary list that they can study themselves, be able to use if you do some writing exercises as well. So kind of bringing in that continuity all the way around.
And if you're doing a famous novel like Charlotte's Web, for example, I have used AI before to say like, hey, I'm going to be reading this chapter. Even if I haven't read it yet, say we're going to be reading chapter 3. Can you give me a couple of highlight things to have my learner be thinking about? Sometimes it's good for us. I know that you did this the other night. We were watching a movie with the girls, And before it started, you were like, I want to explain a few things so that they knew like how this part of it was going to work. And then they watched the movie and it made so much more sense to them. So if you can either read ahead yourself, or if it is a famous, novel that's been around forever, then you can look up like what's the major movements of the chapters. You can prepare. Sometimes it's handy to explain in advance so that when they read it, they get a lot more out of it.
As an educator, all we need to do is one step ahead of our students.
Right, exactly. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can do that. But remember that this is we need to take a literary focus to it, because it's fun, but it's also how do we focus on key elements, getting our learners, depending on their level and where they're at, understanding plot and how the characters are developing, writing, or understanding at least settings and conflicts and the major movements of the story. So this is great if you want to use like a graphic organizer that you can you do like the plot mountain or Venn diagrams for characters.
Spiderweb plot as well. Centered theme with, evidence or facts or occurrences wrapped around it.
Something like that would be great to hang up on the wall. I was thinking, we were talking about like reading logs. I was thinking about even going on Canva or something and doing like stars or symbols or something for however many chapters there are or whatever it is that your child can, color in or whatever if they're elementary. I mean, if they're older, obviously that's not as appropriate, but for the younger kids, like there's some really great ways we can incentivize and make visual representations of what's going on in the book. Yeah, I think it's kind of cool too to see like character arcs and to see what our students, maybe even have them write or describe what they think of this character within the first couple chapters. And then at the very end of the book, what do they think of these characters? Not just the main character, but maybe a lot of times the whatever character is more the antagonist. Yeah. By the end of the book, you have a different understanding of their position or whatever. And so, I mean, that could be really interesting too.
Yeah, really plotting out the story, not just chapter by chapter, but also including your exercises. But if you're doing more of a story structure type of element, you're like, okay, here's the call to action. If you want to follow kind of like a hero's journey structure, or I know that one's not as popular as much as these days, a little bit more sophisticated, story structures, but the hero's journey is pretty well known, and you go, okay, well, here's, is the story or the novel broken up into thirds, 3-act story structure, a quarter, then you have 50% in the middle build, and then the ending payoff is 25%. You can actually mark those in the chapter and verify that and see that this author was following a classic story structure in this way, and you can call out those key points and stuff and have really fun visual representation of the book that you're reading. Can bring a whole other layer, especially if you're a learner. Needs to be a little bit more auditory if you want to do audiobooks, but also visual. The visual elements I have seen help really enhance and understand the more nuanced aspects of difficult things like, understanding literary concepts, or, especially at a younger level, how is a story structured? How did they move through the space, not just through the book, but actually through the world and the setting, and really understanding those aspects, I think, is helpful, and using a visual method is a good way to do that.
Yeah, there's so many great visual tools if you do a little bit of looking, and like Canva, not to mention it again, but it's a great free tool.
We love that tool. We use it all the time.
We do use it all the time. And they have lots of template diagrams and different things. So if there's something you want to do and you want to make it themed and make it cool.
If you search educational in the themes, depending on what you've chosen, like if you like, there are a lot of we should do a whole Canva thing again. I know we did one before. We should update it now.
Maybe we should.
But they have educational classes of things to create, and then within that they have all these themes, and you can type educational and whatnot, and you'll see a ton of teacher supporting materials that you can absolutely incorporate into your homeschool as print offs, as book descriptions or Venn diagrams or whatever you need to put together. This tool is really helpful for you.
Yeah, it can do a great job. So remember, when you're, adding this focus, right? We are focusing on the literary elements and things, but also bring in your student and get them to do some critical thinking about, how would you feel in this situation? What would you have done? Does this remind you of something in your life? What what should this character do differently, or what kind of options do you think this character really has? Sometimes we read a book and oftentimes characters feel like they only really have one option.
Yeah.
Like, well, this is what I have to do. And it's like, well, no, there's actually lots of options. There was lots of things you could have done. It's funny, as my youngest and I were reading the first Harry Potter book, she kept saying that. She goes, but why doesn't he go to Dumbledore? Why doesn't he tell McGonagall? They could have told Hagrid this was going on. They could have done all these things. It's like, yeah, the characters felt like they only had like one option. Mm-hmm. But you're right. There was all kinds of things that they could have done differently. And then take that to the next logical conclusion, which is like, well, how would the story have been different if they would have done something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
If they would have made a different option. It could be really fun to try to write like alternate endings or different things too. So
well, and that gets into the writing extensions that can flow from a novel study.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously early entry level thing, and this is something we're doing a lot of. Pretty much every story we are reading or having our students read. Even my youngest now, the 6-year-old, the young one, is now reading her readers from All About Reading, and I'm having her, do setting, do characters, and then write, just a very simple sentence to tell me, what happened in the story, or, what was the problem in the story, whatnot. These writing extensions, even at early levels, is a really helpful way for us to get more of the ELA elements in there. But obviously, as you get more advanced, we can really start to open up what we can do. You were talking about fan fiction or alternate endings.
Yeah, it's fun.
Keeping journals, or keeping, imagining being a diary of the character that you are doing.
That's a really cool idea.
You can have just a ton of creative ways. Whatever your learner is excited about, you can easily put this in here. Maybe they're more of a graphic or arty type of kid, and they're going to start making graphic novel of the thing you're reading.
Yeah, illustrations of their favorite scenes.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what we're doing with our youngest. She'll illustrate, and we'll help her to write or scribe for her a sentence that describes what we read, something that was interesting to her. You could also, this is a good opportunity to make like lap books. You can do the old school book report if you want to, but you are required to get the little folder with the little brass tabs that open and keep the whole report nice. But like you could do a whole kind of foldered report version where they draw a map of the setting of the story, and then they've got maybe a sheet all about the characters and a sheet about the major plot elements and other setting issues.
Or if you're a Dungeons and Dragons family or a tabletop gaming family, you guys could roll out and play certain scenes and that type of thing.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. Like make a campaign based on the book. That's neat.
I had a friend who was writing a novel that was set in the Mediterranean around the Roman time periods and the battles with the Carthaginians. And he wanted to do an alternate history. And he actually played it out on a Roll20 website for D&D. And we have not done a lot of D&D, but he was big into it. And he actually wanted to roll out and play his entire game with all the armies and all the characters. And with him, he had to get all the background knowledge and learn about all the, who had the elephants and who had these type of archers, and these guys had war dogs and all these type of. So he had to learn about all the armies and all the gear, so that he could then make character sheets for all the characters and the generals and whatnot, and then play the game as a game. I'm just thinking about like, if you have that level of interest in your family, or your learner has that type of interest, that's another kind of nice big wrinkle that you would never have gotten in a public school setting. But allows them to kind of take that deep dive into the novel and play the novel or play the game, or you guys can make up a game around it. Or, as the book's going, you're reading through the book, you can gamify the book along the way.
Sure.
Yeah, there's just a lot of creativity, and it's really wide open to what your learner wants. As you add in more complexity around writing assignments and that type of thing, you can imagine how much writing would be needed if you're building your own little tabletop world of that game or that book.
That's so cool.
That is a great way for them to get a lot of writing experience that would be non-traditional in what you would expect. You're not writing a 5-paragraph essay, but think about the depth of what you're asking them to create, their backstories and worlds and settings and gear and all that type of stuff. Huge aspects and huge elements of writing there as well.
Yeah. And, not to dissuade from the 5-paragraph essay, because that is a really important element. And as our students get older, we do want to teach them how to start writing even small, compare and contrast type essays, right? You could read the book, watch the movie, and look at how they're the same and different. And you can start small. You can even do, short paragraph things and then grow this into something more. We do definitely want our kids kids to, leave home knowing how to write a really strong 5-paragraph essay. So we can kind of take the baby steps as they're in elementary, and then in middle school, we're going to be starting to ask for, some longer written responses and things.
I'm starting to make that evolution now. I've been really focusing the last year a lot of sentence writing, 1 or 2 sentences, and now I'm starting to ask for 3, 4, and 5 sentences and more paragraphs describing what's happening, and really focusing on continuity and focusing on sentence stems that accelerate her ability to create a more readable, more enjoyable text, as opposed to very stilted, subject, verb, noun, type of thing, and creating more elegant writing that is more enjoyable to read and more creative and more fun, and having some openings that are really fun and whatnot, and having her start to cultivate that. So I'm into that like 4 to 5 sentence range now that I'm starting to ask for. And that's a big ask.
We had definitely a reluctant reader, and that translates into the writing, right?
The reluctant writer,
because she feels that it's getting a lot better, definitely, but we're a little bit behind where we probably should be for 4th grade.
Yeah, we have a podcast coming up on struggling readers. So if you're out there, we got one coming up in a couple weeks probably that will come out, and I think it might help be helpful. Yeah, because we've been through it.
Oh yeah, we have, and still coming off of it. I think as she transitions into more writing. The other thing is, don't forget about projects. Projects are just such a great way to reinforce reading. I mean, there's that classic old school diorama with the shoebox, but there's we talked about lots of ideas in project-based learning, about role playing. They could make a big art project. There's all kinds of different things, and you can look up great projects that you can work on that would go with your novel study.
And anytime, like maybe just as a wrap up as we're closing out here, I think anything that we are doing in this respect where we are trying to get learning through some vehicle, and this is our vehicle that we hopped in, closed the door, and turned on the vehicle, is the novel study and building something around that. Don't ever forget that the goal of this is, obviously there are the skills that we're trying to teach them, the learning. The nature of the book that we're reading is immaterial, right? It's everything around it. It's all the skills about reading and everything. But I think at the core of what we're trying to talk about here today is the love for reading. I think is probably the most important thing we want to keep. So whenever you're making those decisions, however you're crafting it, however you're structuring it, however you're pacing it, whatever projects or activities you want to do, keep it at the core. Is we want the children to love reading and to continue that going forward. So whatever we're doing, we want to make sure that's as enjoyable as possible by the themes we choose, by the books we choose, by the activities we choose that cater to what our learner wants to do. But really, we want them to, when they get done with this, want to pick up the next book and employ all those skills that we've taught them, all the critical thinking skills, so that when we get into the next book, they love it just as much. Or when they pick up a side book that's just for fun, they are able to use those skills there as well and move forward with their interest.
It brings greater enjoyment to the book too. I think it's really important what you're saying about that. This is all about fostering a love of reading, a love of literature, and a way to think about it as they're reading, so that they're going to get much more depth out of the books that they decide to read themselves. I think it can often too be a concern, like, well, hey, I'm not an English teacher. At some point, you feel like you're maybe out of your depth. I think it's really okay. You can read ahead. There's lots of tools online that can help, especially if you choose a book that's often done for novel studies, if your child's into it.
Ton of resources online and tons of media that you can consume in parallel or before the novel study that can assist you as the educator to have a deeper understanding or deeper appreciation of the thing you're learning about.
Also, remember that there's not necessarily one right answer for these, right? Part of reading literature and interpreting it is your own views and your own creativity going into that assessment. So that's one of the other things. It's that to keep at the core, I think, is the love of reading, like you're saying, but also respecting and encouraging the creativity of our kids. And if they've got a novel, pun intended, way to view that reading material or that character, like they're like, I really think what's going on with that character is this. If you can support it, go for it, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think there's a teaching element to it too. If it's unsupportable, then that's obviously that doesn't work out. But this is about like, hey, sell me on it. Tell me why you think that is that way. And it doesn't matter if that doesn't match the novel study stuff that you read online about it. If they've got a good argument, I say go for it.
Absolutely. So next week we're going to hop in and do the impossible and take our ELA novel study and find out ways we can bring in other subjects. One of the difficulties is, not just being so singularly focused on our stuff, because especially as we get older, as our learners begin to get older, there's so much crossover with respect to literature and math and science and everything. And there's so many ways that we can hit multiple subjects at once. And that's a great way for us to ease the load of what we have to do on a day-to-day basis by making our studies maybe a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more subtle, and be able to loop in other subjects as well. Whether it's, we've been doing the Summer of Science and we've been looping in enormous amounts of ELA work, as a way of kind of like wrapping around multi-subject studies. And that's maybe something as we get older and more sophisticated as educators, we can start to think about tailoring that in that way. And next week, we're going to give you guys some ideas on how to take your novel study and actually bring in other subjects.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
Happy homeschooling!